Let's return to our top story and the concerns after the announcement of an 18% increase kicking in from April in the price of electricity. The agricultural sector is already deeply concerned about the impact of the ongoing electricity crisis and how that is affecting the production of food. In fact, they've been asking for help for months now, but the increase in power cuts to stage 6 this week has led them to once more sound the alarm over their ability to keep our supermarket shelves stocked. I'm joined now by the CEO of Agri SA, Christo. Mr. Van Rheede, thank you so much for your time. I wonder if you could just give us a sense of the losses that have been incurred so far by farmers due to this intermittent power supply.
This stage 6 load shedding has a very, very negative impact on the agriculture sector. Our farmers in the Northern Cape along the Orange and Vaal River, they are irrigation farmers, and they've been confronted with a massive heat wave as well as load shedding level 6. And this is leading to a situation now where many of those farmers stand to lose their crops because there's just no electricity to irrigate their seedlings. We also have our export season happening at this point in time, and our deciduous fruit needs to be exported. It needs refrigeration. Our cold storage systems are being compromised heavily due to load shedding. So this is a huge crisis for the sector.
Talk to me as well about the news today that NERSA has granted Eskom the right to increase electricity by more than 18% from April. How is that going to further impact the farmers' ability to produce food and stay out of debt?
Remember, farmers have been facing huge increases in terms of various input costs. Petroleum or diesel has risen steeply over the past few months. Shipping cost, packaging cost, as well as fertilizer cost has risen tremendously, more than 100% in many instances. So this additional 18% is really putting the margins of farmers under tremendous pressure. What we need to really confront government with is that it's one thing to require of consumers to pay these additional increases, but what about the debt of your consumers in places such as Soweto, your municipalities? That debt currently sits at 60 billion rand. And if Eskom can get hold of those consumers and force them to pay, it will bring great relief to all of us. I think it is so unfair that it is expected of business to fork out the money all the time, whilst other people just don't care. And at the end of the day, all of us suffer as a result of this.
So the farming sector is under tremendous pressure. Is it even more difficult for your small-scale farmers? And I would imagine, as with any small business, they're perhaps less able to cushion themselves from the impact of load shedding and all these increases. Could we be facing a possible crisis in small-scale farming?
Remember, our small-scale farmers, as well as our medium-sized commercial farmers, they are drowning in debt at this point in time. Secondly, we've seen also an increase in the cost of capital over time. So interest rates has gone up tremendously. I am not sure how those farmers are going to survive. If your big commercial farmers are struggling at this point in time, how much more will those farmers be able to run a financially sustainable farming practice? What I need to emphasize is that our bigger farmers, yes, they can afford your big generators. One farmer told me he's got 5 of those big generators. For each generator, he had to fork out almost 300,000 rand for diesel just for December alone. That's an additional cost of 1.5 million rand that those farmers have to fork out. And your small-scale farmers simply don't have the money.
The African Farmers Association, one of the suggestions they're making is that there's subsidies for farmers who want to install solar panels. That sounds like a great practical idea. I wonder if you could talk to me about some of the practical interventions that you're calling for and whether you've had that dialogue with government or with Eskom as yet.
It's very clear that this problem of load shedding will not be resolved within the next 5 to 10 years unless there's a drastic step being taken by government, put all the politics aside and say, let's appoint the right people there, turn around the tide of corruption and focus on bringing private sector supply on board. And now I'm not talking about just empty promises, but real action. So for the meanwhile, I think most of us, even private households, are reliant on generating their own electricity. And that's why we are saying, let's look at a subsidy to bring down the cost of installing your own solar system. The government can partly subsidize that. I think that will bring great relief to private households and even for businesses. In addition, we have been calling for the expansion of the diesel rebate for the farming sector. Now, I know mining sector and others, they receive that diesel rebate, but and that diesel rebate in farming is applicable to farmers that plow and harvest and transport their goods to the nearest market. But now, at this point in time, many farmers have to generate their own electricity and they have to buy their own diesel generators and so forth. And that's why we say, let's expand that rebate for the purchasing of diesel for power generation purposes.
When most of us go to the supermarket and we look at the increased costs of goods, it's very easy to make the assumption that the farmers are adding that onto the consumer, therefore they're coping just fine. We cannot deny that food prices have gone up. So why is that not helping farmers?
Remember, farmers are price takers. They are not price makers. I've spoken to export farmers, for example. They haven't seen any increase of the products that they've sent overseas. Your British customer, your European consumer or customer, they flatly refuse to pay, additional money for any products that are landed on their shores. So farmers receive the same kind of money for the products that they've received 5 years ago. And in many instances, that's the situation in South Africa as well, because your consumer are really broke at this point in time. Many consumers are unemployed, and you can push up your price as you wish, but if people don't have the money to buy those products, then your products will go nowhere. So yes, there's an entire value chain that add cost to the final price due to load shedding, due to all kinds of other increases, the cost of diesel and so forth. But farmers see very little of that final price that consumers pay at the end of the day.
So high prices on our supermarket shelves are one thing, but how close are we and how worried are you about the possibility that we won't have enough food on our shelves? You just explained earlier how we might see a lot of food spoiled because of load shedding and the inability of some farmers to refrigerate properly. That's just one example. There are so many others, and we're seeing all different sectors within agriculture saying that they're having massive problems. How close are we to perhaps severe shortages of food on our supermarket shelves?
At this point in time, there's no need for concern that there will not be food on the shelves. We are very fortunate in that we have a very, very strong and a very resilient commercial agriculture sector. And that sector has the ability to provide not only for the local market, but for export markets as well. And we've seen how that sector has stepped up the game during the COVID pandemic. If it wasn't for the agriculture sector, this country would have been in serious trouble. And why could we manage to produce food during COVID? Because government declared it as an essential service. And now we are again calling for government. We're going to meet with Minister Toko Didiza tomorrow, and we really want to commend her for speedy action to get the sector together. But let's declare the sector again as an essential service. And I'm not discounting the role of other economic sectors at all. What I'm saying is without food in your stomach, you won't be able to drive the mining sector, the car manufacturing sector, and other sectors. Let's prioritize the sector. Let's see what we can do to assist the sector so that people have ample food to eat. Our biggest challenge is not the availability of food. Our biggest challenge is the affordability of food. And the affordability of food is driven by things like load shedding and other rising input costs. And that's what we need to contain at this point in time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. CEO of Agri SA, Christo van Rheede, telling us that the farming community is very concerned about the impact of the electricity crisis.